Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name is Rob, and today I'll be your host. For those of you that don't know, the solo spooky stories, it's a short episode told by myself every other week where I talk about a topic that I find quite interesting, something that maybe might not be a full episode on the main feed, or it's something that's been suggested by a listener. You know, sometimes we get people recommending a few bits and pieces that, again, I might find quite interesting that I just want to talk about. And today is actually one of those days. So we had a listener submit this story to us, and it's something I heard about a while ago. I actually think I heard probably another podcast talking about it, but never really considered doing an episode on it until it was recommended by someone. And yeah, so that's what we're talking about today. But before I get into that, I hope you're all keeping well whenever it is that you're listening to this, and you know, you're going to get some time to yourself to enjoy the festive period, whatever it is that you celebrate or don't celebrate for that matter. Hopefully everyone listening gets some time off though, or just some time to just kind of, you know, reset the brain for a little bit. I know I'm certainly looking forward to some time off myself. But with that, I hope you are enjoying a coffee or tea, whatever it is that you have when you're listening to these, and you're ready for another little short spooky episode. So today's episode takes place in July of 1954, specifically in Tokyo. So a man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, and from what we can see, he was a pretty normal dude, pretty unremarkable, quite an average guy. He was a white guy, he had a beard, and he was wearing a suit, which for 1954 sounds pretty on the head. Just basically just like John Whiteman, effectively. Like, couldn't be more standard sounding than if he tried. Maybe the beard was slightly different. So when he approached the passport desk in the airport, it seemed to be that he spoke some French. They weren't too sure. It sounded like maybe his accent could have been slightly French or something, but again, nothing out of the ordinary. He was also like reasonably good at conversational Japanese, which was obviously quite good, I'd imagine, for an immigration officer. You know, makes their life significantly easier when the person you're talking to speaks Japanese. And yeah, this dude, for all intents and purposes, totally normal guy. Just didn't cause them any issues and just looked completely normal. That is until he handed over his passport to them. So the passport seemed quite normal, allegedly, from everything that I've read online. This seemed like a normal enough passport, except for one thing. This specific passport was issued in a country that no one had heard of. So the country was called Taured. That's Taured. And yeah, as far as the immigration and passport officers in the airport in Tokyo could tell, Taured was not a country that seemed to exist anywhere on Earth, and they really just did not know what to make of this. They were obviously quite confused and, you know, wanted to talk to the guy about it. So obviously, just to find out a bit more information, they talked to the guy and kind of, I think, confronted him a little bit and basically said to him, like, look, what's the story here? Like, you've so clearly got some sort of like fake passport or something. You're after handing over a passport for a country that doesn't even exist. Like, who the fuck are you, basically? And it was at this point that the man allegedly became, as I saw described online, quite frustrated at this. So, you know, he started insisting that Taured was a real place. And not only was it a real place, but it existed for over 1,000 years. So it was some like ancient country that had been around for, you know, quite a long time. And he was pretty adamant about this, and to a point that they were saying that he was becoming like quite emotional about it, quite upset. I think upset or emotional is more the kind of, it's coming out in like anger more than anything else. But yeah, it seems to be for the most part that this guy was like pretty adamant that where he was from was a real place. So the immigration officers didn't want to take any chances here because they just did not know how to navigate this whole kind of issue. You know, they've never had to deal with this before, or not that I'm aware of anyway. And they just didn't know how to process this guy. So to kind of play on the side of caution, they decided that this guy, he was either being completely honest and there was some weirdness going on in the world, or he was a criminal, which is quite a jump, to be fair, but, you know, a jump that will go with them on this. You know, it's of the options, you know, that there's this ancient country that no one's ever heard of before, or the dude is a criminal. Criminal is much more believable. So the officers in charge there decided that, you know what, we're not going to arrest you, but we're going to put you in a hotel for the night and you're not allowed to leave. So it's kind of arresting with extra steps, I suppose. So the officers, they were like, yeah, this is what we're doing. We're putting you in a hotel. We're going to keep you overnight. We'll do more of a thorough investigation. And if it all turns out to be okay, you're free to go. If not, you're fucked. So even though he wasn't under arrest, there were two guards stationed outside the man's room, and they basically, their whole intent was to make sure that he just didn't leave. So when the next morning came, the officers then decided, right, we'll go in and talk to him and we'll see what goes on from here. And allegedly, when they walked into the man's room, he was supposedly vanished without a trace. Or that's one part of the story anyway. So yeah, this ultimately became known as the Taured man. So a lot of people have taken this to be kind of, there's two main pots of belief in this case, and I'm gonna kind of loosely dive into both of them today and let you know what I think at the end, and you can please let me know what you think, because this is such a weird story that it's just fun apart from anything else. So theory number one, and my favorite theory, is a lot of people say that this case perfectly proves that not only was the man, telling the truth, but that he is in fact from Earth, but that he's just not from our version of Earth. So people say that he is from a parallel universe and that he may have accidentally slipped into our dimension through some happenstance, some circumstance. He may have walked through an area with increased energy output or something. Some basically perfect mixture of circumstances that forced him into a different dimension, effectively, a different universe. And this is what we're going to explore initially. So this parallel universe theory, or different dimension, or whatever you want to call it, alternate dimension. So yeah, a lot of people have said since then that this man must have come from a different dimension. And the first kind of bit of evidence that they point towards is the country of Taured itself. So this man was apparently presented with a map of the world. Initially, when the investigators were trying to figure out what was going on, they were like, okay, maybe he is from a country that we just don't know about. It's 1950s Japan. Maybe there's a country out there that we just don't know about. The internet isn't exactly at their fingertips yet. So they're kind of relying on, give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's see. There could be somewhere out there that we're just not aware of. It could be like a small island nation. It could be, a name for a different country that we know it by, or something like that. It could be mistranslation. So they gave this guy a map of the world, and they were like, okay, sure, Taured exists. Just point out where it is. And the guy allegedly is said to have pointed towards Andorra, which is between Spain and France. And when he pointed there, apparently he saw that it was listed as Andorra and became confused. And then this confusion then simmered into anger. And he started kind of asking them, like, well, no, this is my home country of Taured. Why is it not listed on this map? It should be there. It's been there for over 1,000 years. And I suppose, like, if you want to jump back in time and look at this with like an open mind, like, this dude is saying that it's probably been around since like the 9th or 10th centuries, like 11th century, whatever. So like, obviously it's like post-Roman Empire sort of vibe going on, like early medieval period. There was countries being made left, right, and center at that point. So maybe there was a country at that point. Who knows? But in our world anyway, the country of Taured wasn't the case. So, and then on top of this so that's the kind of the map theory. And then on top of this, the guy is also said to have brought with him currency from multiple European countries. And then kind of along with this, he also had stamps on his person from numerous airports around the globe as well. He had even allegedly visited Tokyo on several occasions previously. So the guy was pretty traveled. Like, it was pretty clear that he had been around the world a good few times, at least between Europe and Asia. So he had clearly traveled, and the implication here was that he was traveling with his passport the entire time. So when he was kind of questioned further about this, he gave the name of a company that he allegedly worked for. And this company did in fact exist. So the officials rang the company, contacted them, and they were like, no, we've literally never heard of this man. We have no idea what you're talking about. And yeah, they were like, well, we have this guy here. His name is John Allen Zegras, and he's claiming that he works for you. And they were like, no, we've literally never heard of this man before. We don't know a John Allen Zegras. We've no idea who he is. And so they were like, okay, this is a bit confusing. They went back to him and they were like, okay, look, this company said you don't exist. They've never heard of you before. Like, can you give us something else? So then he gave the name of his hotel that he was allegedly staying at. And he claims that it was the company officials that he worked for in Tokyo were the ones who reserved this hotel for him. So they contacted the hotel, and the hotel said, we've never heard of this man in our life. There is no booking under that name. no company officials for that company have booked anything here. So to kind of add to the just the weirdness of this, the guy apparently, this John Allen Zegras, was able to produce a number of documents that apparently supported this theory or the story. I'm not quite sure what the additional documents were. Obviously there was the stamps and things like that and the currency. So he allegedly had some additional supporting documentation to say that he did have a reservation or something under his name. This just kind of added to the overall kind of weirdness of it all. And then I suppose to top it all off then, with kind of all the evidence, I suppose, for the parallel universe theory, there's the ultimate disappearance of him from his hotel room. So the room was apparently several floors up, there was no balcony, and it was guarded from the outside by guards. So the police apparently, when they were trying to locate him, they even apparently determined that there was no way he could have escaped by the windows in the room, and the guards never saw him leave. So a lot of people have looked at this in kind of combined all of these different points in the story and have gone, these circumstances ultimately conclude that the man temporarily crossed into our dimension or our parallel universe or whatever you want to call it, either accidentally or by choice. In his universe, Taured does exist and he was telling the truth. He does work for this company and he was traveling to Japan, and that his disappearance ultimately is him sliding back into his own universe, seemingly without any sort of explanation or happenstance about it. So if that is the case, that is an insanely cool thing to have happened, and apparently hasn't happened since. I don't know. Phenomenal stuff. And then I suppose looking on the other side of the skeptic front then, which I have to deal with this. A lot of people say that the police were correct, that John Allen Zegras is in fact a criminal. So allegedly, according to a magazine, Snopes, they said that this actually did happen, and that it's basically the story of the man from Taured is kind of basically it's proof that this guy is a fraudster. So there's allegedly a considerable amount of evidence out there to suggest that the true identity of the man from Taured was this John Allen Zegras, and that he was apparently arrested in Tokyo in 1960 for trying to cash in falsified checks and for also using a false passport to get into the country. So yeah, so much so that there's apparently a lot of proof out there that this guy did exist and that he was basically just a con man, that allegedly he was actually mentioned in the British House of Commons. Someone talking about him actually referred to him as this con man basically that had traveled all over the world with an impressive passport and effectively had just managed to evade authorities for years. So yeah, very, very strange. And that, yeah, he allegedly, this guy had this whole story built up to kind of dispute claims that he was being incorrect or that he was false or lying or whatever you want to put it. So he apparently had built his story up so much with all these different lies that he kind of put it to a point where people had to believe him. So he claimed that he was from this country, from Taured, and that, that he was able to give the population numbers, where it was roughly, kind of their language, all this sort of stuff. So someone who, is from a country would viably know all these things as well. So he's just really kind of bolstering up his case. But then going to when this man was arrested, allegedly when he was arrested in 1960, the real Zegras, this guy who was arrested for being a criminal and a con man, he allegedly tried to kill himself after he was imprisoned for a year. And yeah, he basically tried to kill himself because he just didn't want to be in prison, and I think obviously figured he had nothing left to live for. This is where it gets really foggy. So the guy's story is really strange. So as I said, he was arrested for cashing false checks, but then when he kind of was pressed on them, he claimed he was working for the CIA or the FBI, and that these were sanctioned US government checks and all this sort of stuff. And there's so many different parts to this kind of, I suppose, a real aspect of the story that it's very, very messy. But the ultimate the ultimate kind of piece to all of this, though, is that when he was sentenced and tried to kill himself, ultimately, when all this was said and done, he never actually spent any time in prison. So whatever way it worked out, when he was arrested and then was waiting trial and then all this sort of stuff was happening, apparently the trial that the sentencing that he was given, he had already effectively served in the number of days that he'd been in detention, so he was allowed to leave. So this guy Zegras said that he was going to leave Japan to never return and would start his life in a new country. And yeah, apparently he just disappeared off into the wind, never to be seen again. And Snopes has done this article on him, basically saying that he was a real life con man who got caught up in his own lies and ultimately got caught out for it. But yeah, I love this story. It's such a weird, cool, sci-fi sort of story. It's great. I'm a huge fan of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't really... The idea of the con man and all that is probably the most believable one, but god, do I love this parallel universe theory. It's such a cool idea, this kind of like accidental slip into a different reality. So cool. And it's obviously the far better of the theories in my opinion. But yeah, I would love to hear your own thoughts on this, your own theories. You know, what do you think happened to him? Do you agree with this kind of parallel universe theory? Do you think it could happen? I know there's other topics that I've said that I will look into in the future on kind of like time slips and things like that, which we will do a full episode on. This is obviously a similar enough idea that, you know, you could slip into another reality. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and get kind of an idea for where people fall down on this. You can let us know your thoughts on Instagram at the SpookyAFpod. You can get us on Threads. You can email us at thespookafpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I really would. It would be really cool to see how many people fall down on the parallel universe or people who fall down on the con man theory. But with that said, I hope you're having a lovely time today, whenever it is that you're listening to this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.